now we are behind the wheel of my 2020 718 Spyder. And I want to talk through my initial driving impressions. I just hit 400 miles of driving this thing. It's just under 16,000 miles. It is a full CPO until 2027. And we're going to drive one of my favorite roads where I live in hill country, right outside of my house. It is very windy today. I just tested the audio and you should be able to hear me okay. So hopefully that holds true. So I wanted to get a 981 Spyder. And the reason for that was because from reviews, I never driven one, they were more visceral. They were a little bit more raw. That is very evident from just the exhaust note. You can watch plenty of videos, people talk about it. It's got burbles, all of that. But the other thing was they made about 2,100. I'm going to make a video about the build numbers on this because all that data is now accessible by someone on Remlist. But effectively, they made just under 2,100 of these for North America, the Spyder, 718 Spyders. And they made 981 Spyders. So half the production. Now, the other reason why I wanted one of those is they're typically 20, 30, 40% cheaper. This video is coming out December 2025, January 2026, and as it stands, you find 981 Spyders with 20, let's say under 30,000 miles for 90 to 100 plus thousand $90 to 100 plus $1,000. 781s are anywhere from 115, 120 plus. I still see some for like 160, 170. And those are usually like PTS, sub 1,500 miles. So those were the main reasons why I was looking for a 981. Now, if you saw my original video, I talked through the spec and everything. The headlines are pretty simple. Carbon buckets, non-negotiable. 6-speed manual, non-negotiable. CPO was very welcomed. I really wanted to get a CPO. PPF, color, all of those things were high up on the list too. But the two non-negotiables, no matter what, I don't care the price, I don't care the spec. If it wasn't a manual and it didn't have buckets, I wasn't interested. This car came for sale right where I live for $12,000 more than what I put an offer on the day before for a 981. And the 981 I was settling. It was on the lower end of the market. It was silver, which wasn't top of my list. It had the red interior, which wasn't top of my list, but it had the buckets and it had sub 20,000 miles on it. I think I was forcing that a little bit, but thankfully this one came up on the market. So the things initially that I've learned, I've read, now I'm experiencing, the 981 was not touched by the GT department. The 981 was a different car to the 981 GT4, which was touched by the GT department. The only similarities that it had was the transmission, and the motor. Now, the 718 Spyder, it is a GT product. So this is effectively my very own, very first Porsche GT product, which I still cannot believe that I'm able to own one, drive one, especially in this spec, in this condition. It is almost identical. I think Pruninger, who is head of the GT department, said the dampering was a little bit different, but everything else was exactly the same. And he said, and I quote, "This is a GT4 without a roof." And it's a 4-liter, a bespoke 4-liter motor. which is crazy to me because they've been making a 4-liter motor since 2012-ish. If we go away from the Metzger GT3 RS 4-liter, I think the 991.1 GT3s were 4 liters. They might have been 3.8s, but they've had access to a 4-liter for quite some time. And what I learned was that 4-liter didn't fit in this car because of the dry sump, the oil, something, because this motor is rotated, didn't fit with the manual transmission. So what they did is they got a 992.1 Carrera S motor, the turbocharged motor, 3-liter. They took off the turbo, they sleeved it, they bored it, they did all the GT magic to make it a 4-liter, naturally aspirated, 8,000 RPM, flat 6. So it is a bespoke motor in this and in the GT4, which I think is pretty awesome. The other thing is those 4 liters in the GT3s rev to 9,000, and I think, you know, if this car came out before the Spyder RS and the GT4 RS were announced, but you can assume that they did that knowing that those RS products were going to come out, right? So I get that. And listen, anything at 8,000 or above is unbelievable. Do I wish it was higher? Obviously. But even the 981s, I think they're 7,500, 7,600. They're under 8K. It is awesome. It is such a different driving experience than my Shelby GT350R. And most of you will say that is obvious, and it is. But this car is so light on its feet. It is so precise. It almost feels effortless to drive, and it's really hard to describe. The GT350R felt like I was in the ring with Mike Tyson, and I get hit once, I'm done. I'm knocked out. It's over. I even to the day I sold it, never drove the car to its full capacity or capability, because it was such a raw, visceral thing. I got close on the track. I got very close on the track, but that was the only time I could ever even remotely experience that. This car, you know, I am revving out. I'm getting a little sideways. I haven't turned off ESC or TSC yet. I want some more seat time before I do that. But it is way more manageable. It is way more precise, and this is like getting in the ring with, oh, the road is opening up. Stand by. That was nice. That was nice. I don't even remember where we were talking, to be honest. We were behind traffic that whole time. This is like getting in the ring with Bruce Lee. It does a lot of different things very, very, very well. The steering is precise. The shifter, though I do like the Tremec in the Shelby GT350R better, this is pretty hard to beat. It has and the only reason why I say that is because it has a little bit more play. The Tremec and the Shelby had 0 play, but the throws are precise. Everything about this car is pretty unbelievable. I was when I first got it, I was driving some of these roads with no camera, and because it's a mid-engine, right? Engine's right behind me. and the Shelby's much heavier. It's like 600 pounds heavier, and it's got the engine in the front. You know, I was getting at pretty good speeds, and it felt like the front was going to lift. That's how light it feels, obviously, in comparison to a much heavier car and a front engine rear-wheel drive car. But this car is unbelievable. I want to talk a little bit more, because most people ask me this question and are going to assume this question: why did I get a Spyder over a GT4? If I had a Shelby GT350R, isn't the comparison more so with the GT4? Let's do this turn and I'll talk more about it. So yes, the more comparable vehicle to the Shelby GT350R would be the GT4. Thankfully, I'm not the first person to make that transition. I've had a close friend that had a GT350R and got a GT4. I've read on the forums who've had GT350Rs and GT4s. Now, I'm not talking about a regular GT350. I am talking about a GT350R. Right, the more track-oriented and focused Shelby. And outside of a small track or tighter roads, the Shelby GT350R, to those owners, was a more fun experience. It was more visceral. It obviously had way more power, and it was just an overall better driving experience. So while I couldn't afford a GT3 yet, I wanted to try, get back into a Porsche product, but almost have it so it's almost not comparable. And this is not comparable whatsoever to the GT350R. The only thing that is comparable is that they both rev to 8,000 RPM and they're both 6-speed manuals. Outside of that, there is nothing alike between those two vehicles. Now, I will take this car to the track. I plan on going to COTA early next year in about 4 months. I honestly don't expect myself to do a better track time than the 350R, but I'm not really doing it for track times. Plus, I only plan on tracking maybe 1 weekend a year. So, you know, 98% of the time in this car is going to be these country roads, going on date nights with my wife, you know, potentially picking up my kids to and from school, dropping them off, picking them up. That's really where this car is going to come in. The track time is going to be 1 week in a year if I'm lucky. So that is really the reason why I bought this. There's going to be so much more content. If you haven't noticed, I've been driving under 3,000 RPM, and you still hear it. I've already made my first modification to this car, and I unplugged the vacuum lines. I'll make another video talking about what I'm doing, what I plan on doing, what I have done. But effectively, the PSE, when you have it on, it is still shut off between 2,000 and 4,000 RPM. Unplugging the vacuum lines eliminates this button, and it is always on, which is perfectly fine because this car is not unbearably loud, nor do I need to have a quiet mode on startup in the mornings. It's not that loud. So I did that. It took me 5 minutes versus, I don't know, I know there's like Car Graphic and some other ones that are $500-600 plus a pain in the butt to install. I think it makes more sense if I do an over axle pipe, because that will make it much louder. and I think having the functionality of the button will be more effective. But I'll be honest, this is perfect right now, and I don't plan on changing that. But I appreciate you guys watching. I hope you have an awesome weekend, awesome week. Peace.